We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. It's hard not to have the world's situation on the mind, but I'm not going to comment on it. There's nothing we can say on this podcast that's germane. But just
that is true.
Just
I will say, as somebody who grew up in the
cannot have it on my mind.
Yes, as someone who grew up in the 80s and 90s, I'm having to have conversations with my children where they look at me like I have lost my mind. they're like, you're not worried about these things? I'm like, dude, when I was a kid, we had to do drills about hiding underneath our desk.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we all knew it wasn't going to work. And the absurdity of it all has just... I don't know what to tell you.
I am just concerned, very, very concerned, but as an individual,
as we all are.
My goodness. In any event, not gonna talk about that, but just in case I seem a little more down than usual, maybe as the podcast goes on, it'll clear my mind, and we'll just get back into my regular jovial swing of things. But anyway, that's context in the future, in case somebody's listening back to this. So I'll just try to dig into
we'll have to look
fast...
at the date to figure out what we're talking about, I guess.
Yeah. Fast. There are dates on the podcast. Fast little review. I didn't watch a movie this week, but I caught up and finished the end of the first half of the first season. I don't know what they're actually doing. Star Trek Prodigy. Anyway, that's the animated one.
There's a new one?
Yep.
Is that new?
Yeah, it is. It's aimed at kids, but I mean, I like a lot of kids' content.
Me too.
I don't like the actual main character who's taken on the sort of role of captain. I don't like him. Dal, I think, is his name. But I pretty much like all the other characters, so that's fine.
He's named after a stick. He's named after a round tubular stick.
I don't know.
That
I
you
think
shove
it's
into a hole to make it.
Dal, I think. I don't know. I've never really looked up.
So he's
how
named after is either rice or lentils. I don't know which one of this Dalbat is. Dalbat is lentils and rice, and one of them must be rice, and one of them must be lentils, because I ate a lot of it while I was in Nepal. So,
but it is definitely an ensemble cast. That's fine, and he will grow. They've created a character who has a clear character arc and will grow as we go along. So that's all good. And overall, I definitely give it a thumbs up. It is entertaining. I like several of the characters. It's a completely different take on Star Trek. So quite enjoyable. Star Trek Prodigy is worth a watch.
Not that I've watched anything. Oh, we're watching Afterlife, my wife and I.
Afterlife?
On
What's that?
Netflix, which Ricky Gervais.
Okay.
Gervais. It's like got 3 seasons, I think, total.
Okay.
And each season is like 6 episodes long. It is funny adjacent. It's very sad.
Oh, okay.
It's a very sad show.
Oh, so it's a little bit of laughing while crying type of...
Yes,
okay.
Yes. So the general premise, and I'm not spoiling anything because it happens right at the very beginning. You see at the very beginning, he is a widower. Is that right? Mm-hmm. The male is a widower. Yep. I don't remember.
Yeah, widower.
A widower, and he is dealing with that grief at the very beginning of the show, and that's pretty much the through line of is the afterlife is after his wife passes his life. It's fantastic.
Oh,
I love it.
Okay.
I absolutely love it. It's insane how much I identify with the show. It's about a guy whose wife has died, but it's about dealing with trauma. So, and it's got some funny bits. So she likes it. I like it. We're actually kind of pacing ourselves. Usually we would more binge it, watch it pretty quickly. But with knowing that there's only 18 total episodes so far, we are slowing ourselves down and watching the British baking show and rewatching the Creek show from the Levies.
Yes,
the one
we can say it SCHIIT, so it's Schitt's Creek. It's a real place.
You have potty mouth.
It's an absolutely real place.
It is a real place.
Yes.
That is true. All right. So, but Afterlife. I did watch a movie, but I don't want to comment on it because I fell asleep. Not because it was bad, but because I was very tired. So I will watch it
We are
again.
adults with lives watching after hours, and sometimes
this was on Saturday when I did 40 miles on the bike in the morning, and then had a climbing competition, and that went till 10 p.m. afterwards. So I was wrecked and could not walk the next day.
There's so much good content, so much to watch.
All right, this is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You go to avrant.com, find our old episodes there, older episodes, so you can listen in to some of the previous content, some of which is still applicable, some of which is repetitive, and some of which is out of date. So, make sure, though, when you hear something that's definitively out of date, you go to the YouTube video, youtube.com/AVRant podcast. You go to the YouTube video and you comment about how stupid we are for not knowing the thing that we couldn't possibly have known in the past.
That's right.
It's a very important part of this process. It's a very cathartic thing for you to do, to feel very superior to people who could not possibly have known.
It's on the internet now, so that means it was recorded while I'm watching it.
That's right. I've just started answering people who go to old articles and yell at you for not knowing a thing, and just like, what is it like to live in the future? That's just like my go-to response now. I bet everything's way more wonderful than it is right now.
Let us hope.
Oh boy. It's not. It's not.
And by the way, our YouTube page is youtube.com/AVRant. That's the short one that doesn't have podcast on the end.
That's right, the one that doesn't have podcast.
Just so you can find it to leave that nasty comment.
For reasons. I don't remember what those reasons were, but that's the
shorter
reasons
is
for
better.
That.
Why not?
Contact us directly, Rob at avrant.com. His Twitter is at FirstReflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter is at avrant_Tom. So let's thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, you can support the podcast in some way. Many people are now going to patreon.com/AVRant podcast to sign up to become our supporting listener. Those who Patreon will take some money from you every month and give most of it to us. So we're up to 141 patrons, including Todd. So we want to thank Todd and our 141 patrons over at patreon.com.
We sure do. Patreon.com/AVRant podcast. That one's got the podcast on the end of it if you're looking for the link. So yes, a big thank you to our 141 patrons over there supporting us monetarily. Todd, thank you very much for being one of them.
Right, and there's a reason for that, and you're going to find out in a second.
That's right.
If you don't know it already, but... Excuse me, I need some...
Yeah, got to get some coffee in there.
Lubricate my throat here. We got some notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going during the end of the world, I think. So,
strength to strength, we're going here.
So we're just gonna keep plugging along as if this stuff is all gonna work itself out. That's what we're doing. It's where I live. I live in this miasma of not hope and not despair.
Right.
I'm just going to go along as if it will work itself out. I'm pretending not to see it. It's sort of like when you're walking through a parking lot and someone is absolutely losing their mind and screaming at no one, and you just keep walking because you're like, nothing I do will make this situation better, and anything I do will absolutely make my life worse. So if you are a person who can make situations better, you should absolutely act. I am not that person. What I am doing is soldiering on. That's what I'm doing. I'm walking through that parking lot to my car.
Human reaction denial. That's where we
right.
are.
That's where we're at. So we got some notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going from Todd. We got Eric, who's a new listener. He says he enjoys our common sense approach and technical explanations. Jack, he suggests that maybe the only people who should be eligible for the giveaway, spoiler alert, are the ones who say our secret word, of which I will not say because we said it at the end of one podcast. I just put it in there so
you knew that he knew.
I know. We said it at the end of one podcast like 200 episodes ago.
It was mentioned like a couple times in reference to you having said that.
Yes, it was. So good luck finding it.
I have no idea where to point you. No recollection of how long ago that was in my brain.
200 episodes is not even close to a guess. It's just feels like that might be right. It's as fake news gets.
If it
I'm
turned
just
out it
making
was
stuff up over
450 episodes ago, we wouldn't be like, there's no way that could
You
be.
would
It
not-
absolutely might be. We have no idea.
That might be. That could be it. I don't even remember if Liz was still around when we did that episode. That's how long ago that was.
Any of it. It's all gone.
Anyway, so no, you don't have to know the secret word to be part of the giveaway.
It was a fun suggestion, though.
Yes. Gurinder and Scott. So Todd, Eric, Jack, Gurinder, Scott, thank you for thanking us.
Yes, indeed. I'll say the names one more time. Todd, Eric. Welcome, Eric, by the way. Glad you found us and have enjoyed what you've heard so far. Jack, Gurinder, and Scott, thank you all very much for the notes of gratitude. The notes of encouragement are very much appreciated. It was a little bit lighter week in terms of the number of emails received, almost as though people might be distracted by something else, potentially.
Yeah.
Or maybe don't really want to turn on the TV right now, lest they see something upsetting on the news.
I laugh
to keep from crying. Yes,
over here. So we are making the jokes so that we can cover up our pain. That's what we're doing. I don't want you to think that we are making light of the situation in any way, shape, or form. I am not. I am just dealing with it and the way that I deal with it.
Me too.
There we go. So, our giveaway, which we have alluded to a couple of times already. James, House of Cards, our listener. I give people names. I don't remember why James got House of Cards.
I seem to feel like I'm pretty sure you said everything is a House of Cards, and then he liked it. And I think you've criticized him for saying you can't pick your own name, but we're just going along with it.
We're just going along with it.
He's leaving us anyway, so we might as well be kind.
I don't know. This is it. His parting gift is I'll let you have the stupid name. James House of Cards is giving away his open box UMIC 1 and SPL meter. The open box is in quotes because I think he used it all of once.
Indeed.
Maybe twice.
Yes.
But
we cannot call it freshly
used.
Sealed. That wouldn't be fair. The seal has been broken, but it is essentially pristine and brand new.
We will be randomly selecting one of our Patreon patrons to receive them during our episode 800. So if you'd like the chance for us a little $1, because $1 is the minimum that Patreon will let you sign up for. It's $1 a month.
Yes.
I would like you to at least have donated $1.
Yes.
Because James is
these days with Patreon, as soon as you sign up, whatever you pledge is immediately done for
I thought that was only for the higher amounts, but maybe they've changed it since
I don't know.
the last time
I signed up for something that was like $3, it charged me immediately. So I think
good.
I don't know if maybe the $1, I don't know.
No. I remember it being over 20, like 20 or above. It would immediately.
I definitely did not donate 20 to this one. So
yes, okay. If you like, head over to patreon.com/AVRant podcast to sign up if you haven't already. This will be your chance to do it. What episode are we on? I have to go through.
797 right now. So
you got 2 more episodes before it's going to be too late.
That's right.
So we're going to talk about stuff that's in the news, but only on the AV front.
Yes.
We're not really worried about the rest of that stuff. Not even la.
This is very short and only from one company.
All right. Sony unveiled the first look at the PlayStation VR2 headset. The design remains quite similar to the first PlayStation VR headset with a large pad that rests against your forehead, supporting most of the weight, and a simple circular band to hold the headset in place. Once again, the mask can telescope in and out, and now there's a dial to adjust the lens, a vent for airflow so the lenses don't fog up, and 4 cameras on the front to track your controllers and environment. As previously mentioned, the screens inside are OLED with 2000 by 2040 resolution per eye, support for HDR and up to 120 hertz refresh, plus foveated rendering. What the heck's foveated?
So the fovea of your eye is the most focused, like right in the middle part of your retina. So you know how your peripheral vision is not as clear and sharp as what's straight ahead of you. So foveated rendering is there's actually eye tracking inside of the headset. So there are little cameras inside the headset looking at your eyes, tracking which direction your eyes are looking. And it will render in the highest resolution right where your fovea is looking, your most acute vision, while saving resources on the rendering and rendering what's in your peripheral vision at a lower resolution. So the idea
is... How could this ever go wrong? This sounds like a perfect solution.
Yep. It's kind of cool. This will be the first of the like affordable things to do this. So yeah, hopefully that works.
Yeah, hopefully. I'll be honest. So we've had I'm not calling it the Meta Quest. I'm not doing that because when I bought it, it was an Oculus. It's still an Oculus.
And that's what the box says that you own.
That's what it says on the tin. So we've had the Oculus Quest 2 since not this last Christmas, but the Christmas before that. I love it. We use it. It is the most used outside of your phone thing in our house. It gets used all the time by the kids. You know, they want to just unwind for a second. I want to unwind for a second. My wife wants to unwind for a second. She'll play Beat Saber or something like that. Yeah. There's a fishing game we have. We've got that pistol whip game, which is phenomenal as well. You know, and we've got 2 of them so that the kids can play with their friends in the same room or, you know, online if they wanted to as well. So we really like it. I will tell you, it is. The one thing I read in this whole thing was that they have vents. Yeah. Because my face gets hot.
Yep.
That thing like super fast. Like 30 minutes and I'm done because I can't deal with. You know, I never do the sit down except with the fishing game. I never do the sit down part. But even with that in Florida heat, even with the AC on, it's miserable. So I'm glad to hear that is part of it. The VR headset will only work with PlayStation 5, and a single USB-C cable is all you need to connect. Still no price or shipping date as of yet. So you still have to plug the stupid thing into the PlayStation 5.
It does have a cord, but it is many fewer cords and a much less complicated setup than the original PlayStation VR, which was a little bit of a nightmare to get everything connected. So a single USB-C cord is really quite reasonable. I'm sure it'll have a nice long length. So I'm really quite looking forward to this because there are games that are not available for the Quest, although you can connect the Quest to a gaming PC and play any VR games that are available on a PC that way, but I don't want to go to the expense of putting together a high-end gaming PC for that. So I already have a PlayStation 5, so I'm quite looking forward to it. I want to play that Half-Life Alyx game, which I'm assuming Valve will bring to the PlayStation 5 and PlayStation VR2. It would be crazy for them not to. And I want to play the Iron Man game, which, once I got used to the Quest, it was kind of hard to go back to the original PlayStation VR because then you're just looking at those pixels. So this one should be much better. So I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. I think. Well, anyways, I do like VR. It's still not perfect for me.
Yeah, and you wouldn't go buying a whole PlayStation 5 plus this to get that when you already own 2 Quest 2s.
Yeah. Sony also started rolling out the promised VRR firmware update for its 2021 TVs, at least in Europe, and they are super duper pinky promise that the 2022 models will have VRR right out of the box. Super duper pinky promise.
Yep.
That's the official marketing line that they're going with.
Because there was the one indication of one publication saying that they weren't entirely 100% sure that it would have VRR out of the box for the 2022s, but in this announcement, they're it will. The 2022s will have VRR out of the box. We shall see if they are telling the truth. Buy a 2021 TV, wait over a year, and one of the promised features is finally starting to be delivered. Hopefully not as buggy as when they put it on the 2020 models, which were also promised.
This is, again, why this podcast, at least, is very much geared towards, I guess, errors on the side of telling you not to buy the thing that doesn't have the thing.
We learned the hard way
tell you it's going to have the thing. Yes,
we got burned with the Yamaha recommendations, which those still don't have the VRR update. 2.5 years later, so we got burned with that. We got burned with these Sonys. So we're like, if it doesn't do it out of the box, then don't count on it.
Don't count on it, because that's just the new normal these days. Everything's in beta, constant beta, never alpha. Maybe alpha, but it's never finished. Comments from listeners. Alan went with our recommendations to get a pair of SVS Prime Elevation speakers for his desktop setup, and he's very happy with the results. He likes the way they look. He likes the way they sound, and he saved $100 on them during SVS's President's Day sale. He just wanted to say thanks. So he's got these mounted on the wall above his seat there, and he's got 2 monitors. He's kind of shoved in the corner, so they just work out well. Because he's got no room on the desk for speakers anyway.
That's right.
This kind of works out well.
These are angled down, and main thing is he's enjoying the sound, so that is fantastic. And thank you for the update, Alan, and I'm glad you're happy with them.
Clara heard Jack ask about how to gather clips from his disc backups and then stitch them together to make his own demo reels for playback via Plex. Rob suggested Shotcut, which is a free video editing software. Clara gave it a go, but there are limitations, particularly on the audio side, as you're pretty much forced to export your final project with a maximum of 5.1 channel audio. So she suggests using MKV Merge tool from the MKV tool NIX, NIX, open source software. Import an MKV into MKV Merge, then set it to split mode by parts based on timestamps. This is y'all better be writing this down. Yeah. Somebody press pause.
This is
now.
We'll have a timestamp in the YouTube video and in the show notes, so you can repeat this over while you're going through it, so that it makes sense. But a big thank you to Clara for saying this, and I want to have the instructions so that people understand what it is.
Right. So you'll need to figure out your desired start and stop times beforehand, but you simply enter those times, click Start Multiplexing, and it will spit out an MKV clip with the full original audio and video intact. She strongly recommends starting a new file for each and every clip, since output settings are based on whatever codecs are used in the first file that you import. So if one clip is Atmos and the next clip is DTSX, they'll both get output as Atmos unless you handle them as two separate projects. You'll end up with a bunch of individual clips, but they'll all have full audio and video quality preserved. Then she suggests using Plex's playlist feature rather than trying to stitch together the clips into a single video file, assuming your goal is to demo things like Atmos or DTSX audio clips. Clara sounds smarter than me. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure Clara is like, I couldn't have figured that out if you had paid me $100. That sounds like a lot of work. Thank you, Clara.
Yeah, big time. Thank you. I was actually really not aware of MKV Tool Nix, which, once I started looking into it based on what Clara said, then it is certainly a thing that lots of people on forums and that are talking about and using, because it is a way to manipulate your MKV backups after you have used Make MKV to create backups of your discs. So yes, this is definitely a tool that is growing in popularity. Wonderful that you can create these individual clips with full audio and video quality preserved. So she was saying, like, one of the things I mentioned in Shotcut, video editing software, is that once you have all your individual clips, you can put in transitions and add text or graphics or whatever you wanted to, because it's full video editing software. You wouldn't be able to do that with this technique, because you're just going to end up with a bunch of individual clips.
Right.
You're not going to have transitions between them and stuff like that. But if what you want is something that just kind of looks flashy and has the transitions in that, and you're not actually trying to demo the quality of the audio, like that's not the thing, you're just trying to make a trailer for yourself, then Shotcut works for that, but you're just not going to be able to preserve the full audio quality in particular. You can output it as lossless video quality and lose essentially nothing in the video quality side of things, but for the audio side, yeah, it's not going to be the original audio. But if what you want are to pick selections from movies and have these as demonstration stuff for, you bring in someone in your theater and you want to be able to very quickly go through demos and have the full quality intact, then I love that idea of using the Plex playlist feature, because instead of it being a single video file, it will just automatically play one clip after another, and you can create multiple different playlists and hop around. So that's great. Thank you, Clara.
Seems like you should be able to burn that to a disc, though, so that it's different chapters.
Yeah, but that would require like Ultra HD Blu-ray authoring software, which I'm not aware of on the consumer side.
Right.
Because if you're trying to keep the HDR and everything, you can't use regular Blu-ray authoring software, because that wouldn't handle HDR. So, yeah.
Well, the other thing I was thinking too is, like, as it shifts from one audio codec to the other, there may be like a delay as it
and your AV receiver will be clicking over sound modes, and if you're switching from HDR10 to Dolby Vision to SDR, your TV will be changing modes. So yeah,
I would at least try this and see how it worked out for you, because it sounds like it's a good way to do everything you kind of want. And if you put a little bit of or in the playlist, if you put a little bit of delay before it actually starts, you might be able to let the receiver do its thing so it can get ready to start playing things right away. So a quick apology from Rob to Augie. Oh, God. Rob, what have you done?
I know.
Augie got in touch via Twitter several weeks ago and wanted to ask about whole movie versus music versus game listening mode situation as it applies to Dolby Surround Upmixer. There's no documentation to say there's any difference the way that there was back when Dolby Pro Logic 2 was around. So, as far as he can tell with his Denon X6700H, the only difference you can make is with the center spread option. Augie's Twitter message quickly slid down the list, and it slipped Rob's mind until he vaguely remembered someone asking about the topic. He went looking for it. Ran out of time to look into it this week, but we'll discuss it next time. All right, Augie. Well,
yes. So apology for me, Augie, because I do not
intend...
intend...
AVRant.com.
That's right. I never intend to ignore anybody or not answer a question. It's just that, came in via Twitter and slid down the list. And like in the back of my mind, I was like, I'm sure somebody asked about the whole movie versus music versus game thing. I was like, where was that? I was looking through emails and it wasn't there. And I'm like, so I did eventually find it in my Twitter DMs. I'm like, there it was.
It's one of those things where I think I talked about that on AV Gadgets in the article, and it's not something that's well documented.
But I want to retest it out because I've just been happily pressing the game button and living with that.
Right.
I'm like, I really should double check on that as far as when it comes to Dolby Surround Upmixer and DTS Neural X Upmixer, because it certainly applied to the differences between music versus game in Dolby Pro Logic 2 and DTS Neo X. But now we're on to different upmixers with the immersive audio format. So I need to recheck that. So I'll do that sometime this week, and we'll talk about it on the next episode. But I just wanted to use this as an opportunity to say to everybody, if you don't hear your question answered on this podcast and you asked it, or if you did, contact me via Twitter and never got a reply, hit me up again. I am not ignoring you. I am not doing that intentionally. We do get a lot of messages in various ways, and it certainly sometimes just gets missed, and it is not intentional. So please send it again, because I aim to answer everything that comes in one way or another. I'm
going to put the link to that article I wrote because I had asked you about that, so it might have the actual answer in there.
I'm definitely questioning myself whether that applies to Dolby Surround Upmixer and DTS Neural X. I really have not tested it out, and I need to, because yes, there are people saying both directions online, and nobody has backing up evidence. So it falls to us once again to figure out the truth.
Let's get to the questions here. Rohan was eager to proceed with getting his printed acoustic panels after our discussion about them for his concrete and marble room in India last week.
2 weeks ago.
Sadly, when he reached out to the local GIC dealer in India, the quote he got back for the price was ridiculous. Mm-hmm. The two panels themselves were going to cost about the equivalent of $500, but then the shipping was going to be over $1,000. They're sending it via carrier pigeon. It's a lot of bird feed.
They're inventing a teleporter to bring it to you. You're paying for the R&D research.
I don't blame you, sir. They are actually importing them from GIC Europe, and no joke, you could buy a return trip plane ticket to the UK for less. So the GIC plan is definitely out the window. A quick Google search for printed panels in India turned up a few results, but they are all very thin panels, 1 inch or even a bit less, or foam. It's all very disappointing. So do we have any other Do we have any other ideas? The printed panels are absolutely the only way his wife is willing to consider any acoustic panels in the room. Corner bass traps or standard single color panels are 100% out of the question. Okay, if you can get any sort of panel, like any sort of panel, you are now and it's a reasonable price. Don't worry about the thickness of how much insulation. I want to get the foam. I get the ones with insulation.
Yeah.
And I would just reframe them into a thicker frame and buy more insulation and shove it in the back. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, okay.
So you get a 1x.
Oh, I see. So you're saying get a printed panel.
Yes.
From one of the ones that's available in India.
That's right. And then basically build a frame around that. That's 1x4.
Yeah.
And then fill half of the rest of it or half of it or most of it up with more insulation and hang it on the wall. And you can take that frame and stain it or paint it or make it be whatever color or shape or size you want it to be. I mean, it could be an actual picture frame.
Yeah.
Really. It just has to be deeper than it would normally be, and it has to stand off the wall some. But yeah, I would buy, if you can get acoustic panels that are printed, that are what you want, just get them reframed. I mean, this would take anyone who is handy, which remember, not me, and has the right tools, which I do have the right tools, just not handy. Okay, could knock this out, could knock this part of it out. The staining would take the longest, but all it takes is a couple of miter cuts, some.
It might even look nicer because now you're actually putting a wood frame around the
around
and
the
it really
outside.
looks like a piece of artwork.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good suggestion.
What I would do.
Because I mean, my thought was, okay, we're just going to get printed fabric, because I'm sure there is somewhere in India that will print images on fabric, and I was just thinking, straight DIY. Just fully build the thing and then wrap your own fabric as long as you can get the fabric print. But I kind of, because Rohan has never expressed interest in doing this himself.
Doing it himself.
That has not ever been expressed as an interest in this. So I didn't think of your solution of, getting the ones that are available, but then just putting on a deeper frame so that you can add some more insulation behind there. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, so, it'd be really quite easy and inexpensive, I would think, especially in India. When I was there, this is 20 years ago now, but when I was there, there was always tradesmen around that would do stuff for you. You just had to know the right people and stuff. So, that's what I would do.
Yeah, when you're talking about just making a rectangle and making
it
look a bit nice, and then
right, and
the
if they just
insulation
miter
in
the
behind
edges
doesn't
and
even
stuff
have to
like
be like anything, because that's against the wall, so it could just be loose filled in there.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I like that.
Daniel likes to have a universal remote with him whenever he stays at the hotel, so he doesn't have to use the remote that's provided. What? Wait, what?
Well, also, if you want to change any of the settings, that's one way. Yep.
What would we recommend these days? I guess any universal remote, you should be able to just type in the thingy, the code for whatever TV you're staring at, and it should work. But does Logitech even still put out those all-in-one universal remotes that they used to do, or they don't have anything anymore?
Nah, Logitech's completely out of the game. I would point you to Sofa Baton, and not the X1 that we're still waiting on from Kickstarter, because that has not shipped to us yet. I'm talking about the $50 Sofa Baton U1 that you can most definitely just go to Amazon and buy.
There's got to be a cheaper option than that, though. Yeah.
About $50. That's not bad.
I don't want to accidentally leave $50 behind. I figure there's got to be a $10 universal remote that just. I literally would go to Walmart and look at the wall. There's got to be something up there that says universal. Anything that says universal remote on it will work. To just buy the cheapest one, so that if you forget it, you don't have to cry.
You'd have to figure out the code thing. What I like.
Well, it's going to have it has the little thing, or you'll need a magnifying glass because my eyes no longer will. But they're going to have the paper. These are the codes. You press this button, these 4 buttons, and this other button. It'll switch it to LG.
I see. Well, if you are willing to spend all the way up to $50, I still will recommend the Sofa Baton U1.
Rob's throwing around the big bucks.
I guess so. I didn't think that was crazy expensive, but one thing I do like, just uses regular AA batteries. So even if your batteries die while you're at a hotel, most hotels you can get a pair of AA batteries. It's pretty rare that a hotel wouldn't be able to sell you that, or a drugstore just down the road. So that part is easy. You do not need an internet connection other than to your phone. Like the remote itself doesn't need an internet connection. It connects via Bluetooth to your phone, and you use the Sofa Baton app on your phone to do all the programming, and they've got a big database of codes that exceeds the just pre-programmed, plug in the code from the list things. So I think it's a bit more flexible, a bit more powerful. As long as you can Bluetooth connect to your phone, that's all you need there to set it up. So Sofa Baton U1, $50 from Amazon.
Okay, there's no. I can't believe there's not a $5 option out there.
Well, there's the pre-programmed ones with the code base, but I'd want something a little bit more powerful than that.
All right, Brandon. You just completely cut out, so I'm assuming you're done talking.
Yeah, that's Skype.
Brandon uses his Apple TV 4K for most of his streaming purposes. He typically prefers to listen to 2-channel music just in regular stereo listening mode, no upmixing, but YouTube and YouTube TV are still stuck with 2-channel audio. How did I not have surround sound yet? And he prefers to upmix when watching those. Or you can be like me, and everything comes out of my Xbox One as Atmos, and when I'm when I have to do my physical therapy exercises, of which I am always having to do some because I am always injured because I am an old man who refuses to admit it. I sit next to one speaker and go, yeah, so it's stereo. It says Atmos over there, but it's stereo coming out.
Stuck it into a container, but that doesn't change the original audio.
I'm so mad. Okay. Is there a way to set things up so his Marantz receiver will automatically upmix YouTube TV but play music in stereo mode? Or since they're both coming from the same device, is that not possible? It's not possible.
It is not possible since it will be the same input on the AV receiver at all times. So.
The only way to fix that would be to have two different boxes. One that you would listen to music on, and one that you would watch YouTube
That's
TV
right.
on.
Yeah, you'd have to
just make sure neither of those boxes were made by Microsoft, and you'd be okay.
You'd have to have two separate source devices. Yeah, one exclusively for YouTube and YouTube TV, and the other exclusively for your stereo music. That would be the only way to have it work automatically. But the next part of his question, I think there's a very reasonable solution without that expense.
So he says, if it isn't possible, is there some way he could program a single button on his Harmony remote to switch? He'd prefer not to have to push a listening mode button multiple times. I can't imagine that's not true, because I know when I go to my Denon to try to find a thing, like any command, I have to scroll through hundreds of commands. You just have to find the right one. And I don't know. I think you might have to have two buttons. One to put you into stereo mode and one to put you back into whatever the other mode was. Yes. I don't think that you could just have a toggle on and off. But I think I think this is possible.
Yeah, if you bust back out your original remote that came with your Marantz, you'll notice that there are 4 buttons on that remote, just labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, with it drawn around them with some little text that says Smart Select. And if we go into the manual for your Marantz and look up what that Smart Select is all about, the whole idea is you can set a bunch of parameters, including the listening mode and which input and whether Odyssey is on or off, and several things. You can set a bunch of parameters and then store all that as one of the 4 Smart Select buttons. Now, in your case, all you really want to do is change the listening mode, which you can definitely do. So Smart Select 1 can be the input for your Apple TV 4K, but with it set to stereo only mode, and Smart Select number 2 can be the exact same input, but with the listening mode now set to whatever upmixer you choose to use for YouTube and YouTube TV. So you would program that with the Smart Select. With the Harmony, I do believe those codes are already in there, but if they're not, you can learn your Smart Select number 1 and Smart Select number 2 buttons from the original Marantz remote. I'm not sure, it might even be easier to program it with the Marantz remote to begin with, just to make sure that that's working, and just test those out with the Smart Select buttons on the Marantz's original remote, and then you can try it with the Harmony and see if it still works. But yeah, Smart Select can basically do what you want to do. It will be one button press either way. You will need to program 2 buttons, one for stereo mode, one for upmixing mode. But yeah, that would be the way to do it. There's not a way to just have your Marantz somehow know that, even though they're both coming from the same Apple TV 4K, that you're using a different app and want to change the listening mode. It doesn't have that ability. So yeah, I think Smart Select gets this done.
Jeremy in France. Jeremy says, or I guess we said, if a question comes to mind, send it in. Don't wait for a whole bunch to pile up. So he's going to take us up on that.
Hooray.
And then here comes a massive paragraph. A through Z, double Z's. We might recall that he was helping his brother set up a home theater in the small room. He initially said he wanted small, attractive speakers and a compact AV receiver. He even wanted to be able to easily take down the surround speakers for when the room might have guests sleeping in it. But then he did a 180 and started asking about large speakers with lots of watts. For the same small room?
For the same small room.
Well, he ended up going with the Focal Sib Evo speakers with their integrated upward-firing Atmos drivers on top, along with a Marantz Slimline receiver he already had, his SVS PB1000 sub. So the whole setup cost about the same as the Sony HTA9 system he was considering. His brother set it up on his own, said he's mostly happy with this, but voices sound muffled. Jeremy hasn't seen the setup in person yet, so when he visits next week, he'll check everything and also run Odyssey for him. Well... there might be your problem right there, but let's go on. But what would be our suspects for voices sounding muffled? We wouldn't expect that from Focal speakers, would we? No, we would not. I would
definitely not just inherently.
His center channel is facing down. I mean, the things I have seen in people who don't know what they're doing set up speakers, and I want you to understand, I am not making fun of them.
Not at all.
Because if you don't know, like you don't know. It's like you don't even know what questions to ask because you're so not knowledgeable. It is very similar as going into a mechanic or to a doctor and trying to use normal language to describe whatever problems that you're having, and thinking that you know what the solution is. You just don't. So I have seen surround sound systems where all 5 of the speakers were at the front of the room.
Absolutely.
In no particular order. Okay. It wasn't like left, right, center, and on the outside of those were the surrounds. It was like jumbled. So any number of things could be happening here.
Yeah.
You know enough that you know what the culprits are. First of all, proper placement is key. Making sure that you get a clear line of sight from each one of these speakers to the seating position.
For all we know, the center speaker could be stuffed way to the back of a TV cabinet. It might. I've seen people put their center speaker behind their television because they don't want to see it, or have
inside cabinets with the doors closed. Or the solid wood door. I can't understand the dialogue.
A lot of TVs today, their stand is not very tall, so if you put the center speaker in front of it, it blocks part of the image. So people put the center speaker somewhere else so that it doesn't block part of the image. All of these things are possible. I will also mention connections. It is not beyond the realm of possibility that the AV receiver is set to 5.1, but the center speaker is actually not plugged in or not plugged into the correct binding posts. This is by no means out of the realm of possibility. I just
read a question on Reddit the other day where the guy couldn't figure out why a sub wasn't making very much noise, and he had it plugged into the left speaker pre-out.
Sure.
Everybody's like, why wouldn't you use the subwoofer? Oh, I heard that could blow up the sub. I'm like, where did you even read that? Like, where did you hear that? I don't think you did, because I can't even imagine where that advice would have come from. But, there's people get ideas in their head. So you're going to have to check it top to bottom, tip to tails. You got to make sure that everything's connected right, the wires are run right, the speakers are placed right. Odyssey is run so that all the levels are proper, because, I mean, he could have done who knows what trying to fix it, and it could just be a complete mess. So just assume that you're going to start from scratch, like factory reset. If I go in there, I see a mess, and you're going to know like right away if it's a mess, I think. If you start seeing things that are like, did you change any of the settings in the AV receiver? And they say, well, no. They did.
And
they changed them all.
The physical connections of stuff go, whenever I help out someone with a system, I tend to just disconnect everything and start from scratch rather than trying to fix and trace, which very often takes longer. But I have one more thought. I am not 100% sure on this, but certainly in the case of Sun speakers, when they are shipped, they actually have some kind of protective foam or cardboard over the tweeter or the drivers behind the grill. It's not always immediately noticeable, so definitely pop the grills off and make sure that there isn't some piece of foam or cloth or cardboard physically covering the driver, because that is also not out of the realm of possibility. I'm not certain if the Focal Evos have that, but it's easy enough to check if you're going to be there anyway. I think that covers most of the things we would look at for the obvious. So
unplug everything, factory reset the receiver. Check behind the grills and make sure there's nothing weird. And if there's any ports, I would check those too.
Sure.
Just in case they had port plugs shipped with them. I don't think they do. But you just start from scratch.
Yeah.
And then see how it works out.
Definitely, we would not anticipate the Focal speakers to just naturally sound muffled. Absolutely not. Quite the opposite.
No. Daniel. For 6 months, Daniel is doing a graveyard shift, so he'll be awake when other members of his house are sleeping and vice versa. This means the home theater speakers won't be getting much use, and we'd really like to get some great headphones to keep the experience as close as possible. I swear, my phone never rings. never rings until I do this podcast.
Your ringtone
angry.
sounds like a fire alarm or something, you know?
It's supposed to be. It used to be that little clicky sound that the communicators on Next Generation made.
Yeah.
Except that when they updated the the Android operating system, it changed the delays on everything, and now it sounds really weird, and I can't find the right sound for it. So if anybody wants to send me a ringtone that sounds like that communicator, I would love you, and you would get Listener of the Week. Anyways, for 6 months, Daniel is doing a graveyard shift, so he'll be awake when other members of his house are sleeping and vice versa. That means the home theater speakers won't be getting much use, and he would really like some great headphones to keep the experience as close as possible. He got a Rant SR6011, and plugging headphones into that is perfectly fine. Wireless headphones would be fine too, but not a necessity. He'd like to keep the budget around $500. Is there something that could reasonably mimic surround sound? That would be great. Is DTS Headphone X still a thing? He definitely might be wearing these headphones for several hours in a row, so comfort is a high priority. What do we suggest? I'm going to be dead honest with you, my man. It is very hard to find super duper comfortable headphones, at least in my mind, no matter the price point. For long listening sessions, like several hours in a row. My Oppo PM2s, which were like $700 when they were brand new, $800 when they were brand new. I can't wear those for 3 or 4 hours at a time, like 2 hours, and I need to take a break because they just put they don't even put that much pressure. These are the PM3s. These are a little bit more on-ear ones that they're the same. The Monoprice, the ones I have to look up the stupid model number of them. The magnetic planar ones, which would definitely fit your budget. Those also weren't comfortable enough for me to suggest that you could wear them for multiple hours in a row without taking a break. Now, if you're saying, I will sometimes have to get up and go to the bathroom, and I will sometimes go get something to eat, then most headphones will work for you. Most of these higher end headphones will work for you. But a lot of this has to do with the shape of your head, how much clamping force is on the headphones, and a couple of other, sort of idiosyncratic things that have to do with the size of your ears and the shape of your head and everything else. So, I can suggest the Monoprices to you. I feel like they're the big, okay, when I did the review of those, which I'll look up the number here in a second, but when I did the review of those, I couldn't reasonably get the pleather or the ear cup thingies off, whatever, the pads off, to put the velour ones on there, the softer ones, which were thinner, which I think would have been a lot more comfortable, but I couldn't get them off. I was like, I did everything but took a screwdriver to these things to try to wedge off, and they were like, just twist them off. I'm like, I'm not twisting them off. I'm not sending you back broken headphones. So I will hesitantly recommend those. I would definitely, consider where you order them from and make sure that you have the ability to send them back fairly easily. Okay. So let me look those up real quick.
Yeah, I feel quite strongly, because I know the situation you're in where you are using headphones as your primary way of watching television, and maybe you want to tuck in and watch 4 hours in a row or something like that. I have done that, and I feel quite strongly that you should get something from the Sennheiser HD series, and the ones I would point you to all day long today are the HD 560S. Their retail price is $200. You can find them for $180 on Amazon at the time that we're recording this, so well below your budget. These are not like trying to virtualize surround sound or anything like that. These are a stereo pair of headphones, but they come with a nice long over 10 foot cable with the 1/4-inch jack already on them. They're meant for home listening. These are not really targeted at portable listening, although you can get the shorter 3.5 millimeter cable. In fact, it might come packed in. I'm not sure on this. The cable is detachable. But by default, they come with a nice long 1/4-inch cable meant for home listening. These are the most comfortable headphones you can get for long listening sessions. They are open back, So it is not going to completely block all sound from outside or completely block all sound from escaping. Like, these wouldn't be the perfect headphones for listening in bed next to your partner while they're sleeping next to you.
Sure.
Some sound is escaping. But when you're talking about, I want to be able to use them in my theater while someone is sleeping in a different room of the house, it's not that kind of sound escaping from open back headphones. You're not going to get the deepest of the deep bass out of these. I think we're just going to have to be happy with sacrificing that. And in fact, his next question kind of addresses that on a different level, but I feel pretty strongly, honestly, about going with Sennheiser HD series. You could look at the 599s or one of the other models. They all have the same ear cup design and the same open back design, and the comfort level is similar across the whole series. But in terms of what sound quality you get, and for the good price points, the HD560S are the particular model that I would point you to for sure these days. One other one, if you're on pure sound quality, I do very much like the Hi-Fi Man Sundera. They are a planar magnetic headphone, open back design. They go for $350, but there is no way I would say they are the same comfort level for long listening sessions as the Sennheiser HD series. They are substantially heavier. They, fit against your head in a way that is, perfectly fine for listening to some music. It's not, like they're uncomfortable, but for long listening sessions, there's really no competition for the Sennheiser HD series. So, but that is a possibility. And let's see, what were the ones you looked up? You found the model number for the
M70, M1070. Those are open back. There's an M1070C, which is closed back. So you have both options there. They're going to sound virtually identical, just whatever one you prefer. I prefer, if given the option, I'll take an open back design. Yep. Generally speaking, they're just cooler. Yeah. I mean, physically cooler, not like looking cooler, like temperature cooler to where your ears don't get as hot, you don't sweat underneath them as much.
That's part of it too, for sure.
But if you need a closed back, and these are what, $399 or whatever from, so they fit within your budget. Again, if the velour had, because they are half the size, the depth of the velour, of the pleather ones. They may have been actual leather, I don't remember, but anyways.
Now, as far as trying to preserve a sense of surround sound and that, I'm not gonna try and make the claim that when you plug in, if you go with the Sennheisers that I'm strongly recommending and you plug them into your Marantz, I'm not going to try and make the claim that you're going to be fooled into thinking you're listening to your full-size speakers. Absolutely not. You're going to know you're listening to headphones. But Marantz does have, I think they actually only give you 2 listening modes when you're listening to headphones, which is stereo and virtual. And virtual does some things with the phase in the headphones to give you a little bit more of a sense that the sound is coming from outside your head a little bit. And honestly, it works pretty darn well. It does not sound like you are listening to your full speaker system. Absolutely not. You definitely still know you're listening to headphones, but there is definitely a difference between the standard stereo mode, which does the thing where, anything that's the center speaker sounds like it's right between your ears inside your head, versus the virtual mode, which does give you a much more expansive sounding. It gives you a sense that you're in a bigger space and some of the sounds are outside of your head instead of inside. So that is absolutely worth a try. Don't go in expecting that, you're going to be fooled. You need like a Smith realizer to be fooled with headphones, honestly. I've never found any of the virtual things to really convince me that I'm not wearing headphones. And,
so, I've had headphones with multiple drivers. And,
that doesn't work at all.
that are trying to convince you. It is, I would just rather have very accurate headphones. Yep. So any of these options are probably going to be good. From my perspective, I would, if you could order them all and send them all back for free if something doesn't work, that would be the way to go, because it is very much going to be a comfort thing. Because I think that the differences in performances, might be semi-significant, but not in relation to how comfortable they are. Like I would care more about comfort for 4, 5, 6 hour listening sessions than I would for getting a little bit more performance out of them. So, consider everything. Order the ones that you can send back for free from Amazon or from wherever you get them from.
Honestly, if you get those Sennheiser HD 560Ss and really don't like them, I'd be a bit surprised. Usually what people are bulking at with those is $200 and maybe they don't want to spend that much. But when you're willing to pay as much as you are, I got no problem because I'm well under the budget with $200 for what you were asking. Yeah.
So he already owns a butt kicker with the butt kicker amp. And if those who don't know, that's a tactile transducer that you connect to your chair and shakes your chair. Yeah. Would it be feasible to split the headphone output to feed both the headphone and his butt kicker so that he can keep the physical impact of his deep bass? The Y splitter worked just fine, right?
Yeah, because the butt kicker amp does have its own gain adjustment. So even though you're dealing with a headphone output instead of a regular line level, that can function. The alternative is, I'm not really seeing a reason why you shouldn't be able to use Zone 2 output from your Marantz as well. Use the Zone 2 pre-outs to feed the butt kicker amp. Because in this instance, we aren't applying any EQ to the signal that would be feeding the butt kicker, and we're using stereo listening mode from any source that you're doing while you're using your headphones. So there's no issue with, having to down mix for Zone 2 or something like that when you're using your full surround sound, because he's got a Marantz model that's old enough that you can't do the thing where you're listening to full surround sound in the main zone and then the same source in Zone 2 and stereo. You're going to be headphones for the main zone and stereo for Zone 2, so that all works. So I think if you connected your butt kicker amp to the Zone 2 pre-outs and then you're just sending the same source to both the headphones and Zone 2 at the same time, that would also work. I'm pretty sure.
So I guess it depends on why you want to, how you want to flip cables, because you're probably going to want to flip the cables back so that the butt kickers go with your normal system when you're not using the headphones. So maybe your thought is, I want to have I want to have a whole cable and everything that I take with me, so I don't forget to flip things back, back and forth because you don't want Zone 2 when you're using, or maybe you do. I don't know how you have it hooked up anyway. So both will work. Yeah, you choose. Okay. Todd has a Denon X3300W receiver with all RBH Impression Series speakers. Well, those are about to become, I guess, vintage, right? There's no legacy speakers. A pair of towers, the big center, and a pair of bipole surrounds, and a pair of the bookshelves. When he had his living room built, he got it pre-wired for 9 speakers and 4 subwoofers, but he was never keen on the idea of installing more speakers just to have them. And after he listened to his setup with just 5 speakers and the traditional Dolby setup with the surrounds elevated on the side walls, he concluded that going beyond that really wasn't adding anything. Welcome to the mind of Tom.
Tom and Todd would likely get along.
We would get along just fine. There's so many people just add speakers. I'm going to put floor speakers, and they're going to be on the floor.
Oh, DJ's all about that. He wants the speakers under the floor firing up because we got speakers on the ceiling firing down.
Who? Yeah. He did try surround backs by temporarily putting his bookshelf speakers on ladders against the back wall. He also tried front heights, but a regular old 5-speaker configuration won out. But that was several years ago, and there's a lot more Atmos content available now, so he figured it was time to test things out again. His 3300W can process a maximum of 7 speakers, so he's never tried more than a single pair of Atmos speakers, but he recalled Tom mentioning that A Quiet Place had noticeable contributions from the overheads, and he tried a few other movies that are suggested for demo Atmos, 1917, which I still haven't seen. Ford versus Ferrari, The Matrix, Ready Player One, The Tomorrow War, and Mad Max Fury Road. In all instances, he used his RBH bookshelf speakers, and he tried them as upward-firing speakers on top of his front towers, as well as a position close to his primary seat. He then tried front heights, temporarily on ladders again, and finally top middles. Well, he's got really tall ladders. Mm-hmm. Oh, I see. That one's just wedged up there. Yep. Okay. Boy, how did you keep those speakers from falling off? Did he duct tape them? It looks like they're duct.
Yeah, one of them is taped to a collapsible ladder.
Oh my goodness!
It has taped it on there. Good enough.
So Top Middles finally delivered something he might consider worthwhile, but only with A Quiet Place, The Matrix, and The Tomorrow War out of the movies he tried. The rest of the time, even Top Middles didn't seem to add much versus his elevated surround speakers, and none of the up-firing or height positions were worth it to him at all. Yelp. So he isn't keen on to spend a bunch of money on a new receiver right now. He figures he'll probably go ahead and install a pair of top middle speakers in his ceiling, but he's in no rush. With all that said, we always recommend using 4 overhead speakers, and he wasn't able to try that with his current gear. So would the single pair of top middles be a bad move? Well, you answered your own question, sir. You did. You already answered it, which is sometimes you're going to have the same experience that I have, which is I watch a movie and every once in a while I go, oh, look, I did something.
Yeah.
And I go back to watching the movie. That's it.
Yeah.
That's
once
Atmos.
you install a pair of speakers in your ceiling, like, you know, they're just there. So it's not like it, like in none of the things that he described did he say, I was trying it out with Atmos and it absolutely sounded worse and I would not want it. It was either I really didn't notice it, so it wasn't super duper worth it, or a couple of times I did notice it and it was kind of cool. So there isn't like a downside other than obviously some money and some time is going to be spent getting some in-ceiling speakers and installing them. In terms of, in his specific case, would it be a bad move to install top middles? If we look at where his seat is in the room and where his surround speakers are, they're really quite close to the back wall. He's got some space behind his seat to the back wall. That's a good thing, but not a lot of space. So when he's going to install top middles that are going to be essentially directly above where his seats are, that's already pretty close to the back wall. So if, and this is a big if, but if you ever did upgrade your receiver to one that does 9 channels and you did want to have 4 overhead speakers, I would actually say that's the point where you would take those bookshelf speakers you already own and install them as front heights on your front wall, high up on your front wall, because then you have your 4 overheads, your top middles that you're calling them, they're already basically at the back of the room, given the way this room is set up. And I have no problem with that. You have front to back movement with that setup without purchasing more speakers other than 1 pair of in-ceilings, and you can relabel them whatever you want in the AV receiver. It's just a matter of having 1 pair that's somewhere in front of you and 1 pair that's somewhere a little bit behind you, and you'd have that. So I think you're perfectly safe if you just want to go ahead, put a pair of, I wouldn't spend a lot of money, in-ceiling speakers above your seats and have a little bit of fun with that, and then probably most of the time not even notice that they're there.
Right. So what Rob is basically saying is to like dumb it down, or too long didn't read version. The question really is, if I put top middles up there, am I going to regret it because I should have put top fronts and top rears?
Yeah, exactly.
And what Rob's saying is you don't have space for top rears, really.
That's right.
So you might as well, you're going to be fine with top fronts, and then you can put front heights up later if you want to, which I'm going to tell you, it's just, you're never going to notice it. I swear if my phone rings one more time, I'm going to lose my mind. I cannot believe that this is out.
Yeah, no, in this
so I'm going to start
setup,
this next question, and then I'm going to go take my phone and flush it down the toilet.
Yeah.
As we've mentioned lately, buying RBH speakers isn't all that easy right now, though I heard they just had like some sort of press release.
Yeah, because they've got some new series that they're introducing. Yeah. So, yeah, it's on the way.
So what's a good alternative for in-ceiling speakers to match his impression series? Now, they are flat speakers, so they will match with a lot of stuff.
That's right.
And I have a AV Gadget's Best Atmos Speakers for Your Home Theater article that I will link up, and then Rob's going to give you all the stuff that's probably already in that article.
Yeah, very likely. I mean, we're going to go to the no shock here Sonance Mag 6 speakers available from Best Buy. I did notice that the price they have listed on bestbuy.com right now for basically $170 a pair, which is pretty darn affordable. But it looks like, you know how when they change instead of 99 cents, it turns into like 98 or 97 cents, which usually indicates that they're actually clearing them out as opposed to it just being a sale. Well, they've done that now, which makes me a little bit trepidatious that maybe Best Buy is preparing to not carry the Sonance Mag 6 in-ceiling speakers anymore, which would be a shame. We always end up having to look for alternatives, but for the moment, if you're hearing this in time, they are available for basically $170 a pair. I would strongly recommend also getting the back cans, and those go for $60 a pair. So for $230 right now for a pair of them, the Sonance Mag 6 are ones that would definitely match with RBH speakers very nicely and very easily. If those are not available, or you're hearing this and the price is shot back up, then I would definitely have no problem pointing you to Monoprice's Alpha in-ceiling speakers. Now here again, I always want to have back cans. I always want to have a rear enclosure. So for whatever reason, Monoprice for a long time only seems to carry the 8-inch size back cans. So the metal back cans for the 8-inch version of the Alpha in-ceiling speakers. The back cans themselves go for $80 a pair. So they're actually a bit more expensive than the back cans for the Sonance Mag 6 speakers. But the speakers themselves, the 8-inch version of the in-ceiling Alphas are only $120 a pair. So for $200 even for the pair, you've got some 8-inch Alpha series Monoprice speakers, and I would be happy to recommend those. So one of those two should get it. Tom's just sitting back down. I just finished Tom, so we can go to Eric, I think.
Scam likely. A reminder about my physiotherapy appointment tomorrow, and a reminder about my dentist appointment on Thursday.
Okay.
So, just...
You had to be there, Tom. You had to answer those right now.
Very important. Very important. Yesterday, all day long, my wife was calling me, couldn't get through because my phone refused to connect to the mobile network.
Wonderful.
And today, no problems. No problems on Tuesdays. It's Mondays, which are the issue. Eric has 2 Samsung TVs from 2018, and he has 2 Apple TV 4Ks, one for each TV. He started off with just the 2 Samsung TVs. At the time, they were the first TV models to get the Apple TV app built in. All the other apps that Eric and his wife want to use were also present, including Tableau, which is what they use for over-the-air TV. His wife really likes the simple Samsung remote, and that's what she's used to now. It connects via Bluetooth and Samsung's universal remote. Setup Wizard did a great job of detecting their DirecTV boxes and using the dreaded HDMI-CEC behind the scenes so that all his wife needed was a Samsung remote. But things did not remain rosy for long. Thank you, HDMI. You're the gift that keeps on giving. The Apple TV app on the Samsung TVs cannot do everything their Apple TV 4K can do, so he quickly added those, and that was fine until a recent Apple TV firmware update that went and changed HDMI-CEC codes. Samsung has not updated their database yet, and no amount of trying to contact their technical support has helped in any way. Welcome to my world. This podcast does no longer exist.
I wasn't aware of this, but yeah, that's not shocking. Any of that is not shocking, sadly.
None of that's shocking. Some of the Samsung apps are hit and miss when it comes to supporting things like Atmos and HDR, and worst of all, the Tableau app no longer works. So at this point, the Samsung remote, which is all Eric's wife prefers to use, is really only good for watching DirecTV.
Yeah.
The Siri remote that came with the Apple TV 4K works fine and still turns on the TV and the den and AV receiver via HDMI-CEC, but it doesn't control the DirecTV boxes, so it isn't a complete solution either. So there's a decent chance Samsung will eventually update their CEC database. Obviously, Apple TV 4K is quite a popular device, but given that older TV models, even just 3 or 4 years old like his, often stop receiving firmware updates. He just can't count on it. Sometimes new TVs stop getting firmware updates that were promised. Sometimes Yamaha receivers never get the updates. So is there some inexpensive HDMI-CEC gadget that could sit in between his Samsung TV and his Apple TV 4K, something that would take the old CEC codes that his TV is sending out and translate them into Apple TV's new CC codes. No. That does not exist. Not even a little bit.
Well,
so he's looking into trying to use home bridge automation, but that wasn't totally reliable. There's a USB to CEC adapter, but you'd have to leave a computer running all the time to use it, and computers love to run all the time. Harmony is gone, and his wife never liked it anyways. So he's ordering a Raspberry Pi. Oh, for the love of God.
Yeah, I know.
And we'll see if he can solve the problem that way. But do we know of any surefire solution? Go back in time and get a Harmony remote before they all sold out, and then never let your wife have touched that Samsung remote and only have used the Harmony. Yeah, the remote control situation that's going on in this world right now is a disaster. It is a complete disaster, and I use that word knowing that there are very many real disasters going on in the world right now, and this is not really one of them. But from an AV standpoint, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. There is no good solution to all of these problems that you're describing, which is, nobody's keeping their databases up. The only way to get legacy support.
CEC is so not standardized. For all the claims of it being a standard, it isn't. All these companies only want it to work with their own brands of devices. It's so stupid. Like, why Apple TV? Apple had to change the codes at all. Like, why? Why was that necessary? I know they brought out a new updated hardware device, but I don't know why that was necessary.
It wasn't.
Vaguely, briefly, come across some of the stuff with the Raspberry Pi that you've talked about. I have no idea how to direct you about that. I have no confidence that that is going to be a bulletproof solution. I mean,
and
it's
I don't even know that
essentially
something like the Sofa Baton X1 when it comes, it's supposed to start. You're supposed to order it this month.
That's right.
From Amazon.
Plus, it's $200 at its normal price, so it's not a cheap solution. That should work. I mean, Sofa Baton, we're holding out hope for it because we have no alternatives. If Sofa Baton X1 isn't a decent replacement for what Harmony used to be able to do, we don't have anything. I am not counting on that YIO remote. The people who are hyped about that, I'm like, that is never coming out. If it does, it is certainly not coming out this year. But
so everybody I know has a Sofa Baton on pre-order.
Right.
Like Rob has one, Andrew has one, I have two.
Yeah.
Because my parents use a Harmony remote, and when it dies, and it will someday die, I need to have a replacement for them. And I am unsure that we will ever have a replacement that's better than this one. So I ordered it when it was on sale, just as sort of a backup.
Yeah.
But there is no guarantee that even that will solve your problems. So because they still have to keep their databases up to snuff and everything else.
Right.
But yes, getting out of HDMI-CEC is the solution, but there is no exit ramp for what you want to do right here as of right now. Like, there is no exit ramp.
What his wife wants to do is completely reasonable. You want to have...
It is what HDMI says on the tin. It says you can control everything with any remote you want.
Well, and especially when they really do only have two sources. They have their DirecTV box and an Apple TV 4K. These are not wildly esoteric, nobody else in the world has them devices.
Right.
And they want to be able to press a power button, have both things turn on, and be able to navigate the menus. Like this... She is not asking for anything unreasonable. So before anyone says, just learn how to use multiple remotes, I'm like, no.
She shouldn't have to.
She really shouldn't have to. So, I mean...
You literally sold HDMI-CEC on the promise that she's not going to have to learn a new remote if she doesn't want to.
Right.
Therefore, her asking to not have to learn a new remote is not her being unreasonable. No. You saying that she needs to learn more remotes is you being... I can't say any of those words that I want to say about you.
And we're directing this to some general nebulous you. We are certainly not
to
directing
the straw man.
At Eric.
Hello, straw man.
Eric absolutely is on board with... So unfortunately, all we're really able to do at this first one, because he's got some more ideas, and we're going to get into the... all we can really do is commiserate because, I mean, the Raspberry Pi solution is essentially the solution you talked about of the always-on computer. It's just it's going to be a Raspberry Pi, which is lower power, and you're not really worried about leaving it all the time. But it's the same idea. You're leaving a computer all the time. That's accepting the codes from the Samsung via a USB to HDMI cable and then translating them to blast them back out over your network to the Apple TV. Like,
hello, delay.
It's just so dumb. So unfortunately, we don't have a surefire bulletproof solution. We're hoping and crossing our fingers the Sofa Baton X1, because the X1 is a pretty reasonably simplified remote. It doesn't have if you can handle the Amazon Fire TV remote, it's the exact same buttons plus a little screen with a button that you use on the screen. So the button count on the X1 from Sofa Baton is reasonable, but it is a $200 remote. So at this point, we can only commiserate and say, unfortunately, no, we don't have a better thing to point you to.
I mean, I would be contacting Samsung constantly.
I know.
I would be
Which he's
complaining
been
about it
doing.
on Reddit. Yeah, I mean, which I'm not suggesting you're not doing
That's
that. I'm just
right.
saying. I mean, clearly, the solution that's best for you is for Samsung to fix
Yes.
their database.
Yeah.
That's I mean, it's not an unreasonable ask.
Yeah. No,
You're not saying,
Dude,
hey,
you should see
I mean,
what
this
happens
should be
when
a firmware that is literally just changing codes in a database.
I don't think
it
should even need a firmware update, but I don't know. I don't really know how. You should see what happens when you plug a Nintendo Switch into a Samsung TV. Well, that's not fun.
So one possible workaround would be to drop DirecTV so that his Apple TV 4K is literally the only source device. As mentioned, the Siri remote works fine to power on this TV and receiver and control the volume. And it's really not any more complicated than the Samsung remote, so his wife would probably be just fine switching to that. Mm-hmm. They already use over-the-air TV via Tableau. So do we think that plus streaming can sufficiently replace DirecTV? I mean, I cut the cord a long time ago, so
right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the wrong person to ask.
Yeah, so I'm thinking maybe you sign up for YouTube TV because that's out of all the streaming versions of live TV.
Yeah.
It's not cheap, but if you were willing to pay DirecTV's subscription price, then YouTube TV's subscription price is no worse.
So the selling point of YouTube TV is that in your case is that you can access it through the apps on either of your devices.
That's right.
Which would be your Samsung or your Apple TV 4K.
That's right.
And it basically has unlimited DVR.
That's right.
You don't store it locally. So if you think about your DirecTV box, and I'm certain it has a DVR in it.
Yeah.
If you lose power during the middle of whatever you're watching, you don't. It's gone. You don't get to see it. That's it. But with YouTube TV, you say, I want to record this series, and it records it for you. Like, I had people who recorded the entire Summer Olympics.
Yeah.
They just said, YouTube TV, record. I want
Anything
everything that
that's
says
Summer
Olympics
in
on
it,
it.
record it. Yeah.
I want to record that. And then they had access to that for however long you have access. I don't know how it works. But there to me is a huge selling point, is that I don't have to worry about losing power, and I can just say record everything, and I've got on this unlimited DVR capability.
And we're not saying YouTube TV is the only source, because there are other online streaming solutions for live TV. But that's...
YouTube TV does have surround sound though, right?
No.
Oh, well. Okay.
Stereo.
Well, there's the downside.
There's the downside. Yeah, I know. They should be able to add that at some point. But in any event, that is the situation. With DirecTV, maybe he's got NFL Sunday Ticket, since that has been exclusive to DirecTV for years. That is looking like it's about to change this year. Because DirecTV's exclusivity contract for NFL Sunday Ticket is up. And there are lots of negotiations going on, and it is looking like they are going to bring NFL Sunday Ticket to more than one service. Amazon is definitely in on that. YouTube TV is definitely in on that. So hopefully that all ends up working. So it might not be literally YouTube TV. It might be another live streaming TV service. But I do think there's a way that you could end up with the Apple TV 4K being your only source device. And then if you can just use the Siri remote to control everything... Maybe that's how we...
Can't you just talk to it? I think you can talk to it.
You can talk to it.
So he originally tried a flagship Samsung soundbar. He promptly returned it. It was shocking how poorly the Samsung TV and the Samsung soundbar communicated, with the soundbar shutting itself off if you paused anything, and no way to change inputs in the soundbar without using the soundbar's own remote, which looks identical to the TV's remote but works differently. So that's just... Engineers.
Yeah.
I love them.
We've got one mold. Why can't it do everything? How could that cause confusion?
I got a wife. She's an engineer. Believe me. She's always complaining. Not really about engineers, but just like, how come everything's so complicated? I'm like, look in the mirror. I don't know what you want me to tell you. So he got a Denon S740H receiver and connected 4 speakers they already owned. He'll add a center and a subwoofer in the future, maybe Atmos too. But the remote that came with the Denon, that has to be the worst remote he's ever seen. It's so big, seems like it's got 1,000 buttons. Does it have the thing on the back that you can open up and there's more buttons back there? That's my favorite part. Because I sit there as I'm watching TV and I flick it open and close the whole time, and I don't even hear myself doing it, since I'm doing it, and my wife... I have to keep weapons out of the home theater because she will murder me. I don't use that remote anymore, but I used to. Why don't AV receiver manufacturers put a little more effort into their remotes? If they came with a simple universal remote that actually works, he'd buy a receiver for every TV he owns and tell everyone he knows to do the same. You know what, my dude? They used to. Denon remotes used to come with 2 remotes.
Oh, okay.
They used to come
some
with the
models, I suppose. Yeah.
the full featured remote, and then a smaller remote that was like the guest remote is what they used to call it. And it must not have been popular because they stopped doing it.
Right.
But they did used to do that. They used to come with a smaller remote that just had basic functionality on it, and it was meant to give to your kids or to your in-laws or whoever was coming over who couldn't be trusted with the real remote because it was too many buttons on it. So they did used to do that. They don't do it anymore, and I'm sorry to say that is going to continue.
Yeah.
Again, we've talked about universal, kind of cheap universal remotes earlier on the podcast, and if you're just looking for basic functionality, turn things on, turn things off. If your HDMI-CEC was working, you could buy a cheap universal remote that you could take your wife, go, which one you want, which one looks like it's the one that's going to be able, you're going to understand the best, and she picks it out, and you take it home, and that'd be it. But without HDMI-CEC working, you're screwed.
Yeah, I mean, we've sort of speculated on the idea of, hey, Sound United, go get Harmony from Logitech, since Logitech doesn't want to do it anymore. Or I guess we have to talk to Massimo now. Not until the sale actually goes through. But even then, you were like, I mean, and I agree that it's not as though the Harmony remotes were dead simple. They still had a lot of buttons. They still did a lot of stuff. They still lost sync every once in a while. So, I'm not disagreeing with you whatsoever. I mean, they've clearly these days just gone for, these are all the functions we need the remote to have. Let's not put too much money or effort into that. Let's just have the buttons that we need. And yeah, it's going to be a bit of a mess with a whole bunch of small buttons that are all the same shape and size. I agree with you. It is not the most user-friendly thing to try and use an AV receiver remote. Most of them that come packed in. I don't know. The only defense I can give is it's not an easy business. It's a niche market at this point, AV receivers. So I guess they just don't see the return on investment of putting effort into the remote control. But I'm not disagreeing with you. I can kind of see where they're coming from. I'm not sure that would be enough to start selling AV receivers in mass quantities because the remote that comes with them is the thing you actually want. I don't know.
Well, we've seen attempts at making AV receivers a lot more user friendly. There was that Yamaha, I forget,
and like the Hios receiver from Denon, that was their really big push to try and make the most user friendly AV receiver, because it's got the wireless surrounds and it had a simplified remote, but they did it once and never updated it, and that's been the end of the Hios receiver.
It just is never really taken off. A receiver is a product that, by definition, is meant for a more sophisticated user, and that more sophisticated user does not want a simplified remote.
Right.
I mean, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
In order to get those simplified remotes, you generally need to sell it in a way that a mass market consumer will look at and say, I can deal with this in a soundbar or an all-in-one system.
Yeah.
That it does not include the actual receiver, but it's like, it's got a DVD player that you plug the speakers into, sort of thing. Like those sort of things are the things that are going to have the simplified remotes. It's just the way it goes, unfortunately. They haven't, it's not like they've never tried. They have.
Right.
It's just, it must not have sold well enough because they know all the companies did it once and then they never did it again.
Yeah.
So for the setup in their bedroom, Eric and his wife really want to have a remote on each nightstand on both sides of the bed. But in the case of the Samsung TVs and the Apple TV 4K, you can't have 2 Bluetooth remotes connected at the same time. He's resorted to getting the IR-only Samsung remote that he uses, while his wife uses a Bluetooth remote. But if they switch to only using the Apple TV and the Siri remote, do we know of any way to have 2 remotes working at the same time?
Nope. I mean, you can have 2 remotes that are synced, but they will switch off, right? When one starts working, the other one will come on and vice versa. And
you can't have like volume wars.
No, and there is a delay, while that switch is taking place. I don't know of a solution that Where it's again, this is not a crazy unreasonable thing that he's talking about, but I don't have any fix to point
It's just
you
the
to.
technology. The Bluetooth technology is, I mean, you can have more than one thing connected to a single Bluetooth receiver. I know this because I have got headphones that connect to both my computer and my laptop. So when I turn the headphones on, it says it'll pause and say connected, and it'll pause again and say connected, because it's connected to both at the same time. Now, one's a primary connection and one's a secondary connection. It depends on what. But if I play a video on one and stop it, and then play a video on the other one, I'll hear the audio from both individually. If I play them both at the same time, the primary one is the one that I get. Yeah. So there's no reason why you couldn't, in theory, do this, but I think that it's just not something that they have.
Well, I mean, also you got to remember with Apple, I mean, they figured that if you have an iPad, only one person in the house uses it until very, very recently. That was what they thought. And they figured if you have an Apple TV 4K, only one person is ever using that and watching the TV. And if you have a second Apple TV 4K, it's a separate person using that.
Seems like you should be able to control your Apple TV 4K from your phone, though, right?
Yeah, but it's a similar thing. It's still a direct Bluetooth connection where
still a Bluetooth
that
connection.
just
it's
mimics
not over Wi-Fi.
It mimics the same remote as the Siri remote. It just mimics it on your phone, and it's the same thing. One thing disconnects, the other one connects.
Just let her have the remote.
Yeah.
How about that? Just let her have the remote, and you can use your phone. And then when she's done controlling things.
Yeah.
So Jack has backed up the discs that he owns and uses Plex to play them back. If he uses Plex on a Roku device, will that play back any and all audio formats that might be in any of his disc backups? And what about the video, including Dolby Vision? Well, any and all. I mean, could you be less specific?
Well, no, because I mean, we're just saying, when you have discs, you have Dolby True HD, you have Dolby Digital, you have DTS, you have DTS HD Master Audio, you have Atmos, you have DTS-X. So the very short answer is there are 0 Roku devices that support Dolby True HD and DTS HD Master Audio. And that would include the Atmos and DTS-X versions that you would find on physical discs, because those are an Atmos extension to Dolby True HD and a DTS-X extension to DTS HD Master Audio. The Roku devices support none of that. So the good news is with Plex, your Plex media server will automatically transcode the audio into something that your Roku can play. So it's not like you're going to be there with silence. You're going to get surround sound, but you're not going to get the full lossless quality that was on the disc, and you might not get Atmos or DTS-X. It might just bump you down to 5.1 Dolby Digital Plus or something like that. Right. You'll get sound, but you will not get the original disc audio. On the video side, there are Roku devices that support Dolby Vision. Those would specifically be the Roku Streaming Stick 4K or the Streaming Stick 4K Plus. And the Plus is really just the remote that comes with it. The actual sticks themselves are identical.
Let's not talk more about remotes anymore.
Yes.
I'm done with remotes today.
Or the Roku Ultra, or the Ultra LT that you can find, I think, exclusively at Walmart. But those are the Roku devices that support Dolby Vision. If you do not have one of those hardware Roku devices, then you're not getting Dolby Vision from any other Roku hardware. So when it comes to Plex and playing back your disc backups, if you want the best quality where none of the video and none of the audio has changed whatsoever, the box to get is an NVIDIA Shield. Specifically the 2019 models of either the Shield that looks like a tube or the Shield, Pro. The Shield Pro, the full one. But you want those ones because those are the ones that support Dolby Vision. The older models from 2015 and before do not support Dolby Vision. But an NVIDIA Shield really is the best Plex device. That said, the Xboxes have been updated and the Xboxes support pretty much everything from Plex now. They're good Plex playback devices, Xboxes now.
Especially if you want everything in that Atmos container.
Yeah, it's a little bit hinky there, but that's on the output setting side. In terms of what Plex is able to do on an Xbox, it's all supported. But the best playback device is an NVIDIA Shield. I'm going to stick to that.
All right. Cody. Cody has an Epson 3100 projector connected to a Denon X1400H receiver. His sources are a Sony S1700 Blu-ray player and an Xbox 360 with a Chromecast and a Chromecast with Google TV. He uses a Harmony companion to control everything. Lately, his projector has been shutting itself off 25 to 30 minutes after turning it on. There are no warning lights, and the sound keeps playing, so it doesn't seem to be the sources of the receiver that go into standby. Sometimes if he turns the projector back on, it will play the remainder of the movie, but sometimes it will turn itself off again after 25 to 30 minutes. The super weird thing is that this doesn't seem to happen when he's using the Chromecast. It is mainly with the Sony Blu-ray player, though it happened with the Xbox 360 too. He made sure to double check the sleep timer as Epson, and that wasn't the cause. Any ideas or suggestions for how he can troubleshoot this issue? Do you have a filter on your projector that you have not cleaned, perhaps ever? That might be causing your projector to overheat and set itself into projection mode? Because that's the first thing I would guess.
He was expecting warning lights, something to tell him, but...
hey, I'll tell you what, my Epson projector, when I changed the bulb, not the last time, but the time before that, I didn't totally screw down the screw.
Sure.
That was holding the cover plate on top of it, and as it heated up, it would expand and it would pop open just enough to shut it off.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So there was like a little warning. I think there was some sort of warning, like display, but immediately, it was quick and then it was gone, and I just ended up figuring it out for myself by physically. But if you have not cleaned your filter, I think that would be the first thing I would do.
And a lot of people don't. It's just not something that immediately stands out. And if you haven't literally read the manual, there's nothing super obvious. But on the LCD projectors, you definitely need to clean that filter. And you don't have to replace it. Look at the instructions in the manual. You pop it open, you clean it, but you do have to make sure it's properly reseated and the cover is properly reclosed. Or maybe he did, and that's the problem. The latch is still open. That could be it. Because definitely what you're describing, it really does sound like something like that. I kind of think the whole saying it's never happened with a Chromecast is just coincidence and not actually cause and effect in this case. Because I've certainly... It's not that uncommon with projectors they fire up, everything seems fine, and then they turn off and you can't really tell why, and it's almost always the filter, and if it isn't the filter, it's the lamp, and it's not necessarily that the lamp is on its way out, it's that something is slightly misaligned or misseated, or there's a latch that hasn't been closed. It's that type of thing. And that tends to be really common with what you're describing. So, unfortunately, it's the whole, you might have to look really closely at it, or if you never clean the filter, because that's the number one suspect.
That's the first thing that came to my mind.
Yep, and I agree 100%.
Not enough airflow.
Yeah.
Karl. Construction has not begun on Karl's a detached garage with this new home theater above it. In fact, the final plans have not been completed, so installing gear is still a long ways off. But in trying to get everything planned ahead of time, he's found that he is now in contact with 3 different dealers and potentially a 4th, just trying to get quotes for products and installation of the various brands he has in mind. No one dealer carries all the desired brands. Karl and his wife, very much prefer to support local dealers whenever possible. A couple of the dealers have said they are willing to order brands they do not typically carry, but there won't be any discount if they go that route. So, first of all, stop shopping for gear before you even build this thing.
Well, no, that's not completely unreasonable, because when you're trying to plan the whole construction of the room and you're going to have speakers integrated, you've got to have some idea of what you're going for. So, that's reasonable.
So the monoprice Monolith THX in-wall speakers we recommended before are very much still in the running, but he's got a list of on-wall speaker brands that these 4 local company. Those are not the words in front of me. These 4 local dealers carry, and he'd like to know if any of them jump out as a clearly superior choice. So we've got Dynaudio, Origin Acoustics, True Audio, Martin Logan, Deftech, JBL. Not Synthesis. As they do need to be a bit mindful of the budget, as the costs for constructions seem to keep piling up. Clips,
they do.
Revel, and Focal. He will do his best to hear and audition what he can with these various local dealers, but clearly it would be helpful if we could whittle this list down a bit. Revel and Focal. that list.
I know,
those
right?
are the ones I would consider. Everything else I would not consider. So those are the only two I would consider. And second, I thought we recommended THX speakers because he asked for a THX certified.
That was in
home
there.
theater.
That was in there. Yeah.
So why are you considering non-THX speakers?
None of these local dealers are monoprice retailers.
Because monoprice don't work that way,
That's
Hoss.
exactly it. Yeah. He did mention in his email, he said one of the dealers was saying he couldn't recall, or they might not have even mentioned the brand, where they're like, these are similar in price and performance to the monoprice in walls. I would suspect it might be Snap AV.
You're right.
Because a lot of installers do carry Snap AV, and Snap AV, out of all the installer only brands, is one of the more reasonable, both in price and performance. Honestly, performance wise, I think they're around what the monoprice Alpha series is, and they cost a little bit more, but they're installer only. They're by no means unreasonable. I have zero beef with them, but I don't think they're like super upper tier. I think they're very reasonable. I think Snap AV is very, very reasonable stuff. I have no problem with them whatsoever. The Origin Acoustics and the True Audio, I was like, oh man, are these installer only? It's 100% about profit margin and nothing else. I completely agree. Revel and Focal are the two that stand out right away. Focal is not cheap. If you have considerations of your budget, Focal and Wells are not cheap. I love them. I love that 1000 series. I love the beryllium tweeters. That's a lot of money. So if these are the only brands, I think Revel would be probably the most reasonable, exceedingly neutral, properly designed, proper crossovers, wide dispersion, every adjustment you need so that if you have slightly compromised placement, you can account for that. Excellent power handling, rock solid. I would be very happy to point you to Revel all day long. So if it comes down to that, that's the one I would pick out of the list.
All right. Karl E. and a couple of the dealers have talked things through, and he's concluded that they prefer not to have the front three speakers behind the projection screen. He'd rather keep the center just below the bottom edge and the front left and around either side. We've said this should be good, still sound good with a screen as large as 135 inches, right? I mean, I don't remember what the dimensions were, but I mean, yeah.
I've said that's about as big as I'd want to go with a screen and still have the center below the screen, not behind the screen. Because once you get up to the next sort of standard size, which is about 150 inches, that center does end up very close to the ground when you do that. So to me, that's like the 135 is sort of like the maximizing everything. Like you go bigger than that, and HDR from consumer projectors doesn't really look like HDR anymore, and your center speaker ends up a bit too low. But 135 to me is like sort of the maximum size you want to go to, and I think it still works really nicely.
I just clicked on the wrong thing. Because this whole room is concept piece with the goal of being as close to Venta Black as possible, they like the idea of the front wall completely disappearing visually when the projector is not in use. That's led them to consider a motorized screen, but that involves higher costs and a more complicated installation since they'd want it to completely disappear into the ceiling if they go that route. Then there's the matter of how visually noticeable the in-wall speakers will be. Obviously, they need to be covered with an acoustically transparent black cloth. But how black can that truly be? And if the rest of the wall is Masu black or Fidelio black velvet, will the rectangles for the speakers stick out like a sore thumb? Karl has an eye on the future with when a micro LED display might replace the projection screen, so he'd just like to get our thoughts. Should they go motorized or fixed? Okay, so I was trying to figure out why they weren't going with acoustically transparent and putting the speakers behind it, because that would be the easiest way to hide everything that he's worried about.
Although that would mean the screen is visible all the time.
Well, the solution for that, to me, is not to do all this. To have the motorized screen. I think that's a ludicrous solution for this. I think it's way too expensive.
Okay.
I think that it doesn't. I think that you're not getting the performance. I don't think you're getting anything for it. You're basically paying a huge premium for a screen that has to be tab tension because you're not going to want it to wave around in here. You're going to have it roll down out of the ceiling.
And I mean there are recessed in ceiling screens. That absolutely is a
but
thing.
But then
that
now
exists.
you have to worry about how the rafters are going and everything else. It's going to be a big deal. Why not just install a curtain?
That was my thought too.
A motorized curtain that literally you could
it could be a Fidelio black velvet curtain.
And you walk in the room and the curtain opens up
That's
to reveal
right.
the screen.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
That's it doesn't matter what screen you get back there.
Because I mean,
it doesn't make
that,
if it's micro LED or regular projection screen, it's going to disappear behind the curtain.
Because that
Why
consideration
would you
of if the screen rolls up and you're just looking at the bare wall, there is no acoustically transparent black cloth that's going to be the same shade of black as the Mosu black paint or the Fidelio black velvet.
Right.
If there is a light source shining on that front wall, you are going to be able to see those rectangles. I guarantee it. Whether you would consider it as bad as a sore thumb sticking out, I kind of would, because they are absolutely visible when you're talking about that level of contrast. So to me, if you have the Fidelio black velvet curtain that comes in and covers the screen, whether it's a fixed projection screen or a micro LED in the future, you could even go with one that has no pleats when it's fully closed. When it's closed, it's flat. So there you have your completely flat, disappears black wall, and then it's on a motorized track, and that opens up to reveal the screen. I would 100% go that route instead of the motorized screen, because I do think those black rectangles are going to stick out.
The cost will be so much less,
Yeah.
I really don't... I can't believe that even if you got Wi-Fi enabled, Internet of Things... motorized screen, so that when you walked in, it sensed you being there.
Sure.
and then it opened for itself. I cannot believe that would cost more than a tab tensioned, recessed, installed motorized screen. You're gonna save maybe thousands of dollars going this route. So yeah, Screen Innovations is actually local, and a couple of the dealers he's talking to highly recommend them. He's been leaning towards Stuart Film Screen this whole time, and we've recommended Seymour AV. Any reason Screen Innovations would be a step down? In the case now that you're no longer looking at acoustically transparent,
right,
and you're not sitting that far, not that close, I would 100% go with Screen Innovations. Oh, they're cheap.
No, they're not cheap. They're not cheap at all. Screen Innovations.
Which one do I have?
You have Silver Ticket.
That's what I meant. I'd go with them.
You'd go with Silver Ticket. You'd completely downgrade the price on everything.
Oh yeah.
You'd go right down to Silver Ticket.
You're not going acoustically transparent. There's no reason to go with it.
If you're going fixed frame and solid.
Yeah.
And you of all people just want Unity gain 1.0 gain white. You do not want anything else besides 1.0 gain white. I will not tolerate anything else from you in this room besides 1.0 gain white.
I'm sorry. I thought I was talking about Silver Ticket.
No.
Yes. Get the cheap. That's like $100. Maybe $150 for the 135 inch or something like that.
I mean, if it were me, I'm on board with you, Tom. I given how
you are not going to see the difference.
Yeah, I know. If you just went with Stuart's film screen matte white, that will perform completely to reference level. That is the reference. So if you went with that, no beef with that. Screen Innovations also has a completely matte white Unity gain screen and fixed frames available. Seems a little bit weird to get that from Screen Innovations, because Screen Innovations' whole thing was they were one of the first with the ambient light rejecting screens. That was their black diamond that I never liked because you got sparkles on it, and I never liked it, but it was one of the first, because before that you had Stuart Film Screen's Firehawk, and that was like the only game in town was Stuart Film Screen's Firehawk, and Screen Innovations was the first one that it wasn't all the gray thing, and it had the directional light reflection and all that, but it had some little sparkles, but they've improved it. They're on like generation 4 or 5 or something now of the black diamond, but you absolutely don't need that. You're making a room the pitchiest black room that has ever been, and so you do not need ambient light rejecting. And then the other thing where Screen Innovations was ahead of the pack was acoustically transparent. That was their other big thing that they did, were acoustically transparent screens, which you've said you don't need anymore. So they do have a 1.0 gain, completely matte white screen with a nice fixed frame. It's not cheap. It's right on par with Stuart Film Screen type of prices, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. If that's what you want to do with your dealer, I have no problem on a performance standpoint. I just don't think you need to pay that much, but yeah, there's no downside other than the price.
Yeah. And I cannot stress enough how little you're going to notice the difference.
Yeah.
Between, paying the extra money is you're paying for the name. You are paying for the name that you're of the little thing on the frame that you're probably going to try to scrape off.
Yeah.
Because you want it to be black in here.
That's right.
So
you're going to pay them extra to not put their brand on the frame because you can do that.
You might have to do that, right? Infinite Gary. Related to Karl's question about front speakers positioned around the screen rather than behind it, Gary has always had his center below his screen, and he tilts it up a bit to aim straight at his face. He's never noticed any issue whatsoever with panning sounds that go across the screen this way. It has never seemed as though the sound physically dropped as it went through the center speaker, and it's remained very natural and seamless. But Gene from Audioholics was talking about using your home theater to listen to music and potentially upmixing 2-channel content to make use of all your speakers. Gene is literally the only person I know that does this in this industry, I swear. He does this all the time. He does it in his reviews and stuff. But, it's funny. Anyways. In that scenario, he suggested that having the center at the same height as the front left and right might be more important, since with no image on the screen, there's no visual cue to trick our brain, and we might notice the shift down to the center if it's below the screen. What are our thoughts on that? My thoughts are you could try it and know immediately, and
particularly
you don't have
Infinite
to,
Gary.
This is a guess. This is a guess.
Well,
right
I mean,
here.
Gene's not wrong. There are setups where I've heard that. There are setups where you can tell when you're not looking at anything. I've heard that.
I have listened. So I used to, when I first started, one of the things I reviewed were DTS CDs or DTS DVDs or whatever that were audio. They didn't really have video. They just had an image on a screen.
Yeah, maybe a still image, sure.
And then, and SACDs and that sort of thing. And they would be in 5.1. And, my system was set up like a normal system with my center channel below my TV and the 2 side speakers over there. Never once did I hear that. Never once did I hear it. So what I find disingenuous about this whole thing is this is a humongously easy thing to test. Like, literally anybody can test it at any time using any content whatsoever.
Sure.
Just go to your system, sit down, play something that's in 5.1 or 2. Get a stereo mix and then have it, up mix or whatever. Close your eyes and then tell me what you hear.
Or, turn your projector off in the case of Infinite Gary.
You don't even have to do that. You just have to close your eyes.
Yeah.
You put a blindfold on. I think that rather than worrying about it, test it.
Sure.
I think this could happen.
The planning thread. If you're planning your first theater build, then that's could be a concern.
I wouldn't worry about this one iota. I think this could be more of a concern for very small theaters where you're sitting exceptionally close to your speakers. And the reason is because the angles will be so much greater. Right. In essence, as you're sitting 10 feet away from your speakers, the fact that one is 1 or 2 degrees lower than the other speakers, it's essentially coming from the same place. They are essentially coming from the same place, and especially in Gene's theater, which he's sitting like I don't even know how far away in his new house that he's sitting. They are co-located. I mean, basically, they are on the same plane because the degree difference is so minor that I cannot believe that you're really going to notice that difference and be able to objectively pick it out in an ABX test. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, no, like I say, I have heard setups where this is possible to have this scenario where the sound pans across the front and as it goes from left to center to right or vice versa, it is possible and you don't have any visual cues to trick your brain. So to me, it's not that it's an impossibility. I kind of consider that setup, though, to be not right. It's suboptimal if that's what you're hearing. It tends to happen with speakers that are very directional, that have very limited dispersion. That tends to be the scenario where that comes out. So, that's where I landed. I think if you have nice, wide, uniform dispersion speakers and you aim them and set them up properly, and sometimes this involves not pointing it straight at your face, like any of the front three speakers, because a lot of times people think that must be the ideal, right? That is as on axis as I can get. I'm like, there's a lot of speakers where you move 2 degrees off axis, and now everywhere from 2 degrees off axis to 45 degrees off axis sounds very uniform, and it's only the bang on axis that sounds slightly different. So to me, it isn't necessarily that you want to aim all your speakers right at your face. Sometimes the key is having none of the speakers aimed right at your face. But to me, if you optimize it that way, this isn't an issue. So that's my thought on that.
Right. I guess I could see that. If you have extremely, like, Martin Logan-esque, very directional speakers.
I've heard it with the ring radiator tweeters. That has definitely happened.
I could see this happening, but I would say the case of every speaker we recommend on this podcast, you would have to be the differences in height between the center and the rest of it would have to be immense. And
like I say, when the screens get big enough that the center speaker is like literally on the floor, if it isn't behind, then I've heard it then.
Yeah. Gary picked up a 2-channel Emotiva Bass Aux amplifier, and he ran into an issue he's never come across before. His speaker wires have spade connectors. It's 11-gauge speaker wire, and the spades are quite wide. When he connected them to the Emotiva binding post, the way he always does with his other amplifiers, he didn't get any sound. He wound up shoving one fork of each spade connector into the hole of each binding post where the bare wire speaker would normally go. Have we come across this problem before? I mean, are they too wide? Is that what the problem is?
Well, yeah, it seems like if they're centered, that they're not touching the post, and then it does look like the spades have a bit of a lip on them, so I can see that if you're tightening down the plastic caps of the binding post, that it would actually move it back, so that, like, what I'm saying is that the back of the spade would be like pushed away from the center post. And if the backs of those plastic binding posts are plastic, there's no metal that connects,
which is they almost certainly are.
Then that could do it. So I can see how this ends up being the result. I would say I don't think it's necessary to put the fork into the hole. I think if you just like pulled the spade either down or up so that it's making contact with the metal post. But what you're doing is probably it's physically more secure this way. I could see that. So I can see a scenario where this happens. I can't say I've experienced it personally, but given everything that's described in the photo that he sent, I can surmise how this might have happened.
It's another reason not to buy spades, people. Spades are for shoveling. Scott, when it comes to frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping, do some algorithms deliver noticeably better performance, or are the different implementations from different brands essentially all the same? Scott is specifically wondering about the frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping that's built into JVC projectors versus what would be added by a Lumagen processor. Somebody's been listening to
People can't get away from the FOMO of the Lumagen. Yep.
So there's, I mean, everybody does it their own way. That's just going to be the way it is. I would expect that the Lumagen processor would be better. I don't know that's necessarily the case.
Well,
because it's a
you might like
processor.
It better.
But go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, when it comes to tone mapping, not even just frame by frame dynamic tone mapping, but any tone mapping, there isn't a strict standard on how that is to be done. There is the option of above what this display can actually produce in terms of nits, we just clip it off. You can do that. There's no rule against that. You could just clip all of it off above there. Or you could try to preserve all visible detail all the way up to 10,000 nits. Maybe a manufacturer decides that that's what they try to do, which would mean that everything gets shifted down and probably looks darker in that effort to retain enough headroom to show all the detail up to 10,000 nits when the display itself can't actually get to 10,000 nits. Maybe you do that all the way up to 4,000 nits and then you clip everything above 4. So, I mean, there's all these options of what you can do in the tone mapping, and we as the consumer don't really have any control over that other than which brand we buy, which method of tone mapping we like the best. So definitely, if you had different displays side by side, as I say, even just doing basic tone mapping, not even necessarily frame by frame, there could definitely be visible differences. And that could go for JVC's implementation of frame by frame dynamic tone mapping versus Lumigen's implementation. There could definitely be visible differences. Now, we literally cannot say one of them is right and one of them is wrong, or closer to right or closer to wrong. There's no rule. If JVC just decided, you know what our method is? We just clip off everything above 1,000. That isn't what they do, but they could have, and there's nothing technically wrong with them doing that. That would be a choice that they've made if that what they were doing. So by all accounts, Lumigen has very much erred on the side of they know that mostly what they're connecting to are projectors. That's primarily what the Lumigen Radiance devices are being used for, is with projectors. So they've erred on the side of particularly trying to keep all the shadow detail visible, not having any black crush, because that's really common. Projectors already tone map what would have been 100 nits down to 50, because that's the standard dynamic range for projectors, and they all kind of do that. And then most of them have aimed to try and keep all the detail from in the signal what goes from 100 to 1,000 nits. That's what pretty much all projectors have aimed to do, is keep all that. Above 1,000 nits, some of them kind of just clip it off, some of them try to retain some of the detail, but that's the range that they've aimed for. But all of them shift the standard dynamic range that goes up to 100 nits in the signal. All of them shift that down to 50, and it's very common, because you've shifted it all down, to get some black crush on projectors. Plus the fact that projectors don't produce true black, so you've got a little bit of elevated black of what, is supposed to be 0 nits. It's not 0 nits, there's some light there, and then everything kind of got squished from 100 nits down to 50 nits. So Lumigen has sort of erred on the side of trying to keep all the shadow detail visible primarily, and then trying to keep the detail up to about 2,000 nits. So they're doing a lot of work. There's a lot of work going on there when you're connecting it to a projector and trying to retain all that. JVC, there actually is some adjustment you can make, because they have their theater optimizer where you can enter the values for your screen size and your screen gain, and it keeps track of what lamp mode you're using, and it adjusts the tone curve that it's applying based on those things. And because of that, you can kind of fudge it. You can tell the projector that your screen is bigger or smaller than it really is, or has higher or lower gain than it really does, and you can kind of fudge with it that way to get the projector to be a bit brighter than the way it's programmed would say it would need to be if you gave it accurate size and gain figures.
Right.
So, you can kind of trick it a little bit that way. But the Lumigen, of course, you can do a lot of programming in there too, because you can put in custom curves and stuff into that thing. So bottom line, out of the box, if you saw a different side by side, you're not crazy. It's not like one version of frame by frame dynamic tone mapping is equal to another. There can definitely be visible differences. You have a lot of control either way with the JVC or the Lumigen. And with the JVC, it might be a little bit more trickery and trial and error. But yeah, you can get them looking very, very, very similar.
He asks, what do you do if you want to position a subwoofer in the front corner of your room, but you also want to put a bass trap in that corner, and you also want to address boundary effects from a front speaker that is close to that corner? You just stack the bass trap on top of the subwoofer? That seems like it might not be the best idea. I think it's the best idea. I don't see any reason why you can't just stack that thing. As long as it doesn't have a port up there, like if you have an older SVS cylinder sub, I would maybe not put it directly on top. Yeah. Or if I did, I would put something to make sure that there was something foamy underneath.
Something a little squishy?
Yeah, I got no problems putting it right on top. I think that's a great idea. You should definitely do that.
Physically, I would absolutely have the subwoofers in the corner, and the corner bass trap is directly above the subwoofer. I would probably secure the bass trap to the wall. That would be my solution. Rather than having it literally sitting on the subwoofer and that's the thing holding the bass trap, I would secure it to the wall. That can be as simple as some little L cleats, right? So that would be my solution.
Your cleats.
Yeah, but I see there's no problem having the subwoofer in the corner on the floor, and then above that is your corner bass trap. That's totally fine.
Yeah, I think it's fine. So is there a specific black paint we recommend if you want to paint entire walls black? Yeah, we got a couple, but which one are you going to recommend?
I mean, so being reasonable, the one I would point you to is Sherwin-Williams Tricorn. What is that? A unicorn with 3 horns? Anyway, Sherwin-Williams Tricorn Black. That's the name of it is Tricorn Black. Now, what's going on there is we've talked about Sherwin-Williams neutral gray paints. That starts with the name of it is Gray Screen. And if you look at that, there's a whole series that just get darker and darker in shade. Well, if you go all the way down to the darkest shade, you end up at Tricorn Black. So it is the completely neutral black that is not, reflecting any one color a little bit more than the others. They do have one shade of black, even technically deeper than the Tricorn Black. They call that Black Magic. But the issue there is that is a 99% saturated, it's as much pigment as they can put into their base as you can. And when you do that, there's the logistics of you need to get out of the store and apply it to your wall now. There's no remixing that paint by hand. The pigment starts separating immediately after it comes out of the paint shaker when you put that much pigment into the paint. Otherwise, you end up with that kind of oil effect. You know how when you look at oil, you get the color separation from certain angles? Because they actually have some paints that are oversaturated. They've actually put more pigment in than it's possible to dissolve into the base, and you end up with that sort of shimmery effect. That's what they're going for when they oversaturate with the pigment. So realistically, I think the Tricorn Black is the best choice. It is not the blackest black that exists. It is not Musso Black. It is not Fidelio Black, Velvet Black. It is not Vanta Black, but it is a normal price. It is completely color neutral. If you go with a matte finish, it is essentially completely non-reflective. And it is stable. You actually have a couple days where you can work with it, as opposed to you need to apply this in the store for this to not start separating. So the Black Magic can be a decent choice if you want to do black trim on a black wall, because sometimes you want a slight difference between the black trim and the black wall. So using the Black Magic for the trim can be a decent idea, because you don't need as much of it, and you can apply it right away to the trim and have it ready to go. But by and large, Tricorn Black is where I'd point you, from Sherwin-Williams. Thoughts, Tom?
I literally do not care.
I'd go to the store and, hey, give me some black paint.
I just don't. I mean, I understand people wanting to paint their rooms black. I understand the thought behind it. As someone who has painted rooms before, the thought of having to repaint a room that has been painted black makes me want to die inside just a little bit. It's just a nightmare to even contemplate. So, from in my thought is it's not worth the aggravation.
Well, would you be more in favor of putting fabric? Because fabric can be taken down?
I would be more in favor of doing fabric. We've talked about that before. We have been reminded by people that you need to be careful of what fabric you put up there. You can't just grab any fabric. You need to make sure that it's fire resistant or whatever.
Or at least according to whatever your municipality requires. So check with City Hall, basically.
Right. So I don't know what this room is called, but there's this room that's part of the kind of, if you were to call my kitchen, living room, whatever, it was a deck, a back deck, but it then got incorporated into the house, so it's now all part of the house. So I would call it part of the great room or whatever. Yeah, but it's literally open to the kitchen. Anyways, it was dark blue, painted dark blue, and we had to we repainted it white. So many coats. That's
where it's 3 coats of primer before you get to the paint.
It's a nightmare. So when I hear people talking about painting the front of the room black or something like that, I'm like, you just don't know what you're doing to either yourself or somebody else when you try to resell this house. I can't imagine, going through that kind of trouble to do it and then to have to undo it, and the undoing it so bad. But if you really want to do it, it's your house.
But you could also look into over at Acoustimac, their fire rated and acoustically transparent black suede, for example.
Right.
Is pretty nice. So
yeah. Gurinder. How much time do we have left?
We're at 2 hours.
We're at 2 hours.
I'm willing to keep
Gurinder,
going.
you are out of luck. Who else we have?
We have Gurinder, as mentioned, and we have JR. That was it for this week's list, so we're all right. We should be just fine. Sorry, Gurinder.
All right. Sorry, Gurinder. Psych.
Oh, dear.
All right. It's AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. I want to thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank our 141 patrons over at patreon.com, including Todd. Thank you very much to our patrons.
Yes, indeed. That is patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you'd like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation. So a big thank you to the 141 patrons who have done that. And Todd, thank you for being one of them.
I also want to thank those of you who have sent us emails thanking us for keeping the podcast going, including Todd, Eric, Jack, Gurinder, and Scott. Thank you very much for thanking us.
Yes, indeed. Todd, Eric, Jack, Gurinder, and Scott really do appreciate the notes of encouragement and the notes of gratitude for us keeping the podcast going. We will continue trucking along as long as we're alive to do so. So, yeah.
Oh, poor Rob.
I'm worried.
I think, are you like 10 years younger than me? You must be 10 years younger than
10
me.
Years,
I think that's about right, because I am much more stoic about this whole situation than I think you are. I think there's a lot. I have to have some very uncomfortable, not very uncomfortable, but very serious conversations with my children, who I think are going to start freaking out very soon.
I mean, it's not unreasonable to freak out a little bit.
No, it's not. It's not.
That is an understandable thing. And no, I'm worried being on the west coast of Canada, because I'm like, hey, if you want to attack something that really can't fight back and be U.S. adjacent, yeah. It's kind of freaky.
You'll be fine.
Well, I mean, if we're not, I'm not going to be here to know about it. So I guess
that's the thing. You just gotta not worry about it. There's nothing to worry about, because there's nothing you can do. So just gonna keep on trucking.
That's right. So
don't worry about it.
While it keeps going, a big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
For AVRant, I'm Tom Andrew.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.